Pictures of Hollis Woods, page 47. Fifth picture, the old man. I thought I was alone, sitting on the bottom step in front of the house, drawing the old man, working with a flesh peach pencil. Quick sketches, one after the other, hat down over his eyes in the first, standing in front of the river in the next, sleeping in the hammock in the third. His beard and the way he leaned forward listening. I was trying to capture what he looked like so I'd have it to take back with me, to remember. The screen door opened in back of me with that soft swishing noise, and the old man came out to look over my shoulder. "Oh, Hollis," he said, "where'd you learn to do that?" I shook my head. "Hollis?" I looked toward the river, green today, a willow hanging over the edge. He put his hand on my shoulder. "It's a gift," he said, "to draw things the way they are." I sat very still. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. "And something else," he said. "You shine through in your drawings." I looked up at him, really looked at him, not a quick glance that darted away so he couldn't see my eyes. "My name," I began as he folded himself down on the step next to me. "Hollis Woods is a real place." I shrugged a little. "Hollis Wood," I said, one word, I think. When the old man spoke, I jumped. "It's where they found you as a baby?" "An hour old," I said in an I don't care voice. "No blanket, on a corner, somewhere." Didn't a baby deserve a blanket? "And just the scrap of paper. Call her Hollis Woods." One day, I had gone to see that place. I ran away from one of my houses, tan, green, brick. I circled Queens on the subway, off the subway, onto the Q2 bus, and off the Q2 bus, until I found the spot. It was winter, bleak, but the houses were pretty. I never did find the woods, though. I tried to picture it in the spring when I had been born, with birds chirping and the sun shining. Now, I saw Stephen coming into view in the rowboat. "I play hooky," I told the old man. "Everyone says I'm tough. They say I'm trouble." The old man made a sound in the back of his throat. "Stephen is a great kid," I said. The old man looked surprised. I waited to hear if he would say anything, but Stephen banged the rowboat hard into the rocks along the bank. The old man made another sound. "Watch that, Stephen!" "The kingfisher is on the branch downstream," Stephen called. So we went down to the boat and climbed in to go have a look. The Time with Josie, Chapter 5. "Over the river and through the woods," Josie sang one morning at breakfast. It was a late breakfast. We had stayed up most of the night watching an old black and white movie. "To grandmother's house?" I asked, dropping a cornflake on the table in front of Henry's nose and jumping back as he raised one paw to warn me. Josie waggled her hand, her head still bent. She was carving my tree figure from a piece of oak, stripping the bark until the underneath showed pale and smooth. The head was there, still unformed, the nose just a slight sharp mark. Josie saw me looking at it. "A bit at a time," she said. "The face last, when I'm sure I know you well enough." I didn't say anything. Instead, I ran one finger over Henry's back. His eyes were closed. He was purring, and I figured he didn't know it was me. "Over the river," Josie began again, rocking in her chair with a pleased look on her face. Water, I thought. The ocean. We'd been there twice this week. Odd to see the ocean near the end of November. I'd always thought of it as something to see in the summertime. I put the tea mugs in the sink, sprayed water over them, and waited, leaning against the counter as Josie took a cut in the side of the wood and gently blew the shavings away. She stood up then, ready to go, but instead she stopped to peer out the window. "Someone's coming." I glanced out and saw the gray car pulling into her driveway. The mustard woman had come to check up on me. My own fault, I told myself, hanging around here today instead of going to school. It was that lingering cold note. I hadn't been able to resist. "It's the wrong time," I sang to Josie. She smiled at me, singing too. "And the wrong place?" I reached for her wool hat and scarf and the brown hat with the veil. "Let's go down to the water instead of entertaining," I told her. We slipped out the back door, moving as quietly as we could. It was a game. We passed through Josie's tree figure garden, went through the woods and diagonally across the street. It was a long walk in the cold, and we hadn't stopped for jackets, so we were both shivering by the time we felt the difference in the air, smelled the sharp, sweetish smell of the ocean. We climbed up onto the pier. The fishing boats were gone this late in the morning. I knew some of them by now, and I could see the two smaller ones somewhere out near the horizon. I kept thinking of that gray car, trying to decide what to do. I bent down and picked up a shell. Its edges were crushed, but it had a beautiful color, almost like the sea itself with the sun shining on it. "A piece of good luck," Josie said. I slipped it into a pocket of my jeans and nodded. We needed luck. Josie had moved away from me. I turned and saw her lying on the jetty, holding her hat on with one hand, the loose end of her scarf floating in the water. She wiggled herself down and down until I thought she'd go over. Then, at last, she reached into the mass of foam that had settled around the stanchions of the pier. A moment later, she was up, strands of seagrass clutched in her hand, several inches long, curled along the edges. They were the color of sand. Josie smiled at me and held them up to my hair. "I thought so," she said. "Almost an exact match." I nodded, realizing she had gathered them for my wood figure. It made me think of the drawing box the old man had given me, how often I had held up a pencil to match the color against something. Was the drawing box still at the house in Branches? I turned as I heard the sound of a car and of tires bumping along the wooden planks of the pier in back of me. The mustard woman. She came to a stop about 2 inches away from us and rolled down the window. "Why aren't you in school?" "School?" Josie asked, looking confused. I didn't answer. Of course I didn't. I had learned to keep my mouth closed long ago. In my mind, I pulled myself into a small knot deep inside and tried to think about something else. Anything else. "Get in the car," the mustard woman said. "I'll drive you there right now." One of the fishing boats had almost disappeared. All that was left of it was the needle-thin mast on top. Someday, I'd like to be on that boat, I thought, to see what it would be like to look back at the land. I glanced at the railing that ran along the end of the pier. It was so low it would be hard to see from the ship. "School," Josie said. "Of course." She put her hand on my shoulder. It was the hand holding the seagrass. I felt a soft scratch against my skin. Josie's legs were bare, with dainty spider veins showing, and her silky shoes were soaked with snow and spray. I didn't want the mustard woman to see them. I opened the back door of the car and slid in, and we drove off, leaving Josie looking after us, her head tilted as she waved at me, the seagrass in her hand blowing in the wind. "What's going on here?" the mustard woman said. "No school?" I ran my tongue over my lips, trying to figure out the best lie I could. "I told her today was a holiday, teachers' conference." The mustard woman shook her head. "And she believed that?" she said. "We'll have to see about this." I reached into my pocket and held on to the shell. For the first time in my life, I thought, I'd really have to go to school. I'd have to if I wanted to stay at Josie's. The Time with Josie, Chapter 6. My head was a round burl of wood, the seagrass dried now, a swirl on top. Josie spent hours over it at the kitchen table, humming to herself, a tray of tiny knives spread out in front of her. It was Monday, early in December, almost dark in the late afternoon. No Chinese dinner tonight. I was making a dish Izzy had taught me. "Special deluxe," she had said and smiled at me. Chopped meat, ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and cheese, spooned over hot rolls. Salad, pound cake with confectioner's sugar sifted over the top. It was going to be a special deluxe evening. Beatrice was leaving the next morning for New Mexico, where she'd paint the adobe houses and the desert. "I'll come back when the mood strikes," she had said, "or when my money runs out. We'll close up the movie until I get back." All week I'd had a pain in my chest. I was waiting to see what the mustard woman would do. School was all right. I kept my head in the books, made A's on 2 tests, and had no friends. But if the mustard woman talked to Josie for more than 5 minutes, she'd know about Josie. Strange how much I wanted to stay. Maybe it was because Josie needed me. I'd never been needed before. "Or wanted?" asked a voice in my head. The old man had wanted me, I told myself. So had Izzy. So had Stephen. Then why? Don't think about that. Think about Josie. A little forgetful, Beatrice had said. Maybe old age. But not always forgetful. There was the afternoon Josie had watched me sketch small pictures on my pad. I remember something. She tapped one red fingernail on her lower lip. There's paper in the attic. I haven't seen it for years. I think it belonged to my father. I climbed the stairs, then bent like a pretzel. I scurried around the low attic, stepping over bags and bushel baskets, stopping to look at boxes of paper-thin Christmas ornaments and yellowed leather gloves, until I found what she'd told me about. Huge pieces of paper, gray and dog-eared. I ran my hands over them, thinking about the day the old man gave me the drawing box. As I had maneuvered my way back to the steps, Josie had called up, "There's an easel, too!" Beatrice came now, hurrying up the walk. Her hair had been done up in a high pink swirl at the hairdresser. Her nails matched, and so did her huge pink purse. We were ready for her with the pound cake on Josie's best plate and the dishes on the table. We ate, watching the pale December sun drop behind the trees in the backyard. When Josie went inside for something, Beatrice leaned over. "Take care of her," she whispered. I thought of telling her about the mustard woman in the agency, but what if Josie came back? Beatrice saw me frown. Maybe I shouldn't go. Josie said you've wanted to do this all your life. But go, I said, wishing I could go too. I'd take the short line bus up through New York State. It would be early summer again, the first time I'd seen Stephen and the old man playing checkers in the diner. I'd start over. I'd do everything different. Everything. But instead, I'd do it all right. I'd stay with Josie and... I'll take care of her, I whispered. Somehow, I said in my head. Beatrice turned over one of my pictures. I'll leave my phone number, she said. I'll write it down, so she patted my hand. I won't be there for the first 2 or 3 weeks. I'll be traveling around, but just in case. I watched her make careful, even numbers on the paper and turn it over as Josie came back into the kitchen, another one of my pictures in her hand. I didn't take any chances, though. Through the rest of the dinner, I said the phone number over in my head. I wanted to be sure I'd remember it. 6th picture, driving the truck. I never showed this picture to anyone. The golden field, me with my head back laughing, my hands at the wheel of the truck. It took 4 or 5 pencils to do this. I started with summer green, iron gray, and beach sand. That was something, that Saturday night. Izzy and the old man were going to the movie in town. It's a romance, the old man said, waggling his eyebrows at me. A waste of a good evening. You'll love it, John, Izzy said. There are snacks in the refrigerator and in the cabinet, snacks all over the place. You won't starve. She leaned out the door. And there's a tin of that hard candy on my dresser. Stephen crossed his eyes. They're so sour they curl your tongue. Not mine. I'd been eating them all summer. I couldn't get enough of them. That's because, he began. I knew he was going to joke about me being sour. But the old man came out the door. I just saw the mess you left in the shed, he told Stephen. Straighten that place up. It's bad enough your room looks the way it does. What's this neatness kick? Didn't you notice how neat Hollis things are? Without thinking, I put my hand up. Don't, I began, but it came out almost as a breath. Neither of them heard, or maybe they just weren't paying attention. Stephen unfolded himself from his chair so slowly, it seemed as if he weren't moving. Hang in there, Hollis Woods, Stephen said as the old man stamped around the side of the house and started the car. We're going to be out of here in 5 minutes. Where? Already he was running around the side of the house to the shed. I sat there listening as he threw things around for a few minutes, and then he was back. I'm going to teach you to drive. Good thing they took the car instead of the truck. He dangled the keys in front of my nose. Anyone who can keep her things disinfected can drive a truck. I don't think, I began. Scared? Never. All right, don't waste my valuable time arguing. In back of the evergreens and the row of holly bushes was a flat field. The old man kept it mowed against snakes, rattlers that struck blind in the summer. Don't worry, Stephen said, sliding into the truck. No one's been bitten for about 100 years. Pop worries about everything. Stephen drove as if he'd been doing it all his life. He grinned across at me in the suicide seat. Since I was about 8, he said, knowing what I was thinking. I'm going to take the truck up the mountain one day. He showed me the gears and the pedals, and then we switched seats. And so I drove in that field in the summer evening light, Stephen shouting directions as I lurched through the ruts, bucking, stalling, starting up again with gear grinding noises. Aha, Hollis Woods, he yelled. There's hope for you. I knew it. I pressed my foot down on the gas pedal a little harder. Yahoo! I yelled. It's me, driving a pickup truck.